Hello, I am Lydia Holt, the music teacher here at St. Constantine, or one of them now, which is a really nice thing to say. I'm also slightly losing my voice, so I will try to not do that as we go along here, and pardon my coughing. In preparation for this lecture, I was thinking about how the year has been going here at St. Constantine as far as music, and I was realizing that once again, much of what I've been doing this year is teaching our students the rudiments of music theory. It feels like I teach rudiments all the time. Simple things like how to name notes, how the music staff works, and the fact that the treble clef is higher than the bass clef. It begins to feel stupid, especially where the older students are concerned. In theory, I totally believe that these dumb little things are important, but in reality, I wonder if it's all worth it. So why? Why continue to drill every good boy does fine, and quarter notes are held for a duration of one beat? The answers come when I teach an upper-level piano lesson, analyze a choir piece, listen to a symphony with the upper school, or practice my own instrument. I make discoveries and connections that are new and exciting every time I struggle with a student or look at a piece in a different way, mostly thanks to my knowledge of the rudiments of music theory. There is so much hidden in the music we love, things that are surprising, things that make you stop and wonder at the ingenuity and care that went into it, and just the incredible way things work out after all. I had an old music theory teacher who used to use the phrase, "is perceived after the fact as becoming," all the time, and that encapsulates a bit of the joy. Something that seemed like a bland note or harmony suddenly becomes, in context, something beautiful. Bernstein would say that some of the best composers take our instinct of balance and symmetry and violate it just a little. We don't always get what we want or expect immediately, but we do get something worth the study and the wait and the agony. As far as methods go, there's a lot of ways we can see and find and understand beauty in the world, and even in music. Part of the lure of music is simply that one can sit back and enjoy what Copeland named the sensuous plane, just letting the waves of music wash over you. Well, who hasn't enjoyed this emotional experience? What I truly love and want to share with our students about music is the necessity of music. When we truly listen carefully, we find ourselves existing in time, carried along, listening with intense, selfless focus, understanding deeper the nuts and bolts of how beauty is created, and the satisfaction and peace that come at the very end of a Chopin nocturne. This experience is something that I hope no student leaves St. Constantine without. I think that to truly know beautiful music is to love it, and indeed that's the greatest thing an educator could dream of. And I hope you get a small taste of it in this short lecture/recital. So how do we get there? Again, we must do what the students do. Study a bit of the rudiments of music theory. Do is one of the first things I teach to our youngest students. We call it the resting tone. And notice how nearly every folk song we sing comes back to and ends on this one note. You can make it by going like this. Everybody show me do. Use your right hand. Yeah, this is do. Nice. Let's sing a folk song that we all should be familiar with. Row, row, row your boat. Start on that note. Here we go. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. What is that last note? That's the resting tone. We call it do. If you sing a song and you ask your pre-K or kinder student, they will hopefully be able to tell you that. It's impossible to get away from just how much do means in our common practice music vocabulary. Let's try a little experiment. Together, let's sing all of the do, re, mi's. You can see them on the wall over there, slightly dilapidated. Together, let's sing up, beginning at do. But watch me and stop when I stop. I'll cut you off. So we start at do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. If you've been listening to any kind of music, you'll recognize just how much we all want to go to the do at the very top. Life is but a dream is another great example, if you don't sing the dream at the very end. So, merrily, 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 life is but a... Right, you know, you hear it even if you don't actually sing it. Each note of the scale has a note that it prefers to head toward, and they all eventually lead back to do. That's basically what a major scale is. There's more to be said on all of that, but that will have to suffice. You can know that different scales, different notes act as the resting tone. So for example, in the minor mode, la is the resting tone. Do, ti, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. Again, my voice is kind of going. Now, time for the dreaded E, G, B, D, F. And if you don't know what that means, you'll learn in just a moment. Let's begin like the pre-K students and practice saying our alphabet. Let's say it together. Ready? Here we go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Exactly. It's always shocking for the young students to discover the simplicity of the music alphabet. They would literally just go on saying it forever. They get into it so much. But is it simple to say it in reverse? Let's give it a shot. So we'll start on G and go backwards. See if you can do it. G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G. Wait, there's a note before A. Isn't that very interesting? I can stump many students. First grade in particular loves to have me try and trick them. I can think of quite a few students in particular. But excellent. You're now ready for one of our favorite music class songs. Again, I will try to sing it. When a note is on a line, every good boy does fine. When a note is on a space, it spells the word face. But only on the treble clef, only on the treble clef. When a note is on a line, every good boy does fine. Exactly, yeah. So the music staff, as you can see on some of those papers I gave you, is 5 lines and 4 spaces. If you go from the bottom on the treble clef, it goes, every good boy does fine, E, G, B, D, F. And if you count up using the spaces, it spells the word face, F, A, C, E. It's interesting that young students don't know how to spell the word face. So first I have to teach them how to spell the word face. It took me a while to realize that. It's not as like falling off a log as you would think. So for example, if I asked you, what is the second space of the treble clef? What is the letter name? Would you know? Yes. A, you're right. What about the 4th line of the treble clef? D, yeah, wow. Okay, so we'll stop there and let you off the hook for the other clefs beyond the treble and come back to this idea just a little bit later. First, let's go back to our do, re, mi's. How many different notes are there in the major scale? If you counted do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi. There's 7, yeah. Exactly. Now, if we have those 7 different notes, we have so many different combinations for different combinations or distances. Combining these notes gives us what is called intervals, or a specific distance between notes. Every interval is either consonant or dissonant. This affords an opportunity for another experiment. I'm going to get over here to the piano so I can help you out. I'm going to divide you into 2 groups. Mrs. Lewis and all are in that group. Mrs. Muller and all are in this group. Let's sing some intervals and decide if they're consonant or dissonant. See if they give you like a jarring feeling, or if they feel like something you would be okay with. So for example, let's have this group sing do, mi, do. Let's have this group sing so, do. Okay, nice. What do you think? Anybody who thinks it's dissonant? Who thinks it's consonant? You would be right. That's a consonant interval. Try this one. Do. You guys sing do again. I'm going to have y'all sing re. Do, re. Okay, cool. Any thoughts? Dissonant? Dissonant, consonant. It's more dissonant, yeah. You can kind of tell it's hard to sing the two at the same time, right? Yeah, and if you hear them harmonically, you're like, oh, yeah, I kind of want that to do something, which is interesting. One step further from consonance and dissonance, actually I'm going to stay here, is tendency. Remember how each one of those notes is eventually trying to get home to do? Let's see if we can find some resolution for some of those intervals. Listen to a few of these. Here is one that we would call dissonant. But if you listen to that top note, it really just wants to go, it's really trying. So here's another one. It's maybe not quite as dissonant, but it still has a little tendency to it. Can you tell if it wants, I don't know if there's any musicians, can you tell if it wants to go down or up? Listen. Do you know? Does it want to go down? Down? It wants to go down, actually. You're right. It wants to go there, and then you get a nice consonant. If it went up, it would just go to another dissonance, and then we would have to go again to get to a consonance. So for the musicians among us, you may have noticed that each of these intervals tends to resolve to the notes included in some sort of tonic chord. A tonic chord is do and the notes that are closely related to it. This type of resolution is called an authentic cadence in music theory terminology, and it's the most common type of cadence. There's also things like half cadences and plagal cadences and deceptive cadences. Again, no time to go into these shockingly thrilling topics just now, but we will mention them later. For now, we can move on to one of the only subjects that can rival music theory in my book, which is piano. I'd like to introduce you to a few well-known elementary piano pieces and give you a few things to think about. These are all things that I think every student should be able to understand, eventually, after going through our music courses at St. Constantine. Conclusions that, while knowing piano definitely helps, may be drawn even from a simple study of the score and careful listening to a recording. I'll begin by playing a small part of the piece for you. Our first example tonight is Chopin's Prelude in B minor. It's the first example on your handout. You'll notice that since we are in minor, rather than a resting tone of do, the minor equivalent of la is where we want to come home to rest. However, for the sake of simplicity, tonight we will refer to even this resting tone of la as do, or else things would just get entirely too complicated. One more thing, prelude in B minor. B is the do. So if you see any notes, every good boy does fine, you'll know that every good boy, third line in the treble clef, is our resting tone. So here, this could be interesting. Here is a little bit of this prelude. I'm just going to play like the first line for you. Unfortunately, I have to stop there. I will play, don't worry, I'll play the rest of it later. To me, the story of this piece is basically, I want to get back to B. Chopin sets the stage with this oft-heard melodic figure of an arpeggio, outlining a B minor chord. That's all the notes that go with B, or do. It goes up to a third of the chord, which is not the B. This is the note we wanted. But instead of going, that would be too easy. So we go. This falls rather satisfyingly to B. But it quickly continues falling down through it to a repetition of the same thing again that takes us even further away. So listen here, it is the first time. There's the B. And we go further. And we get closer to it, but then we go really far away. And this oral problem is repeated over and over again. I've given you the entire score in your handout. If you look through the score, and I did what I am saying I did, I've marked every occurrence of B on a strong beat with a circle. Strong beats are very important for understanding harmonies in music. There is a slight concession to our hopes in measure 9, where the beginning bars are repeated. Do you see that? Where is it in measure 9? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's the third line. You see that? You see the same thing again. But notice this time it goes even further away. The figure quickly throws us up and away to something completely different. If you see all of the naturals later on in that line, if you know what naturals are, they're like extra little symbols next to the notes. We are suddenly in the key of C. This is B minor where we started. This is C where we now are. It's nothing like the B. In fact, maybe we're kind of forgetting about the B by this point. Perhaps the most delicious thing in this piece, and something that I like to point out when performing or when teaching it, is the 2 tries in the left hand to resolve so to do. So always wants to go to do. That's something I should have told you before. So if this is do, it always wants so do. Like everyone basically knows that interval. Like, oh Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree. What's another one? Hark the herald angels sing. It's a very, very common so do interval and resolution and tendency that so wants to go to do. I've marked these 2 tries for you in your score with Roman numerals 1 and 2. It's in the bass clef. If you can see where the Roman numerals 1 and 2 are, that measure goes so, and so you think you're going to get do, but instead, it really wants to go home, but instead takes deceptive route and leads us further away. Instead, we don't get our so do. The second time, however, where is that? Here we go. We get do. There's our final do at the end. All the tension kind of resolves. It's finally time for B. Of course, Chopin could have just ended the piece there, but you see there's a couple measures left. There's a little accented chromaticism in the same measure as the resolution, and another arpeggiation, which takes us back further away from the B, where we were resting. But it's only for a little while. We're home again in the penultimate measure. But just in case we're tempted to think it's easy, listen to the last 2 measures. It goes like this. Do. Do you hear that note on the top? It's not a do. It kind of leaves you feeling unsettled. It's a so. It's a part of the B minor chord, but it's also the part that's the dominant and leaves us insecure, wondering if Chopin has another trick up his sleeve, wishing for a do, wondering if there's more coming. But it's the end of the piece. And then you realize at the end of the piece, you're basically sitting there listening to nothing. That always happens to me at the end of this piece. It's like you can suddenly hear the ticking of the clock or the air conditioning or something like that. Such fun performing and studying piano is. I look forward to taking this musical journey with you one more time at the end of the lecture. But for now, there is still more in store. Let's look at some Schumann. It's the next piece in your little packet there. I've always been enchanted by this piece and the whole set of pieces. And I'm sure many of you have heard it before. Just in case, however, to give some context to our discussion, let me play a little part of it for you. This is the Reverie, or it also has a German name, number 7. Did you hear the so do? Yeah, so do. It happens so many times. I just had to make the music pun while I could. Look at the score. Can you see how many times that happens? You can recognize how that so do looks. But I've marked them for you with brackets. How many are there? Anybody see? 5? Right. So it's kind of open to interpretation. with like transposition, and some things kind of look like that, and maybe that's also sort of related. Not sure. Like every good common practice composer, Schumann knows that our ears automatically want to bring so back home to do. It's interesting how he gives us only one note in the first measure. This is how the piece starts. It leaves us slightly disoriented and demands our attention. Who knows? Maybe this note will be do. That'd be interesting. We could have do. That would be the key we're in. Or perhaps it's mi. Maybe that's the key we're going to. Maybe it's so. Maybe it's something completely unexpected, not one of those things. But then he gives us a do, and suddenly we know where we are. Patterns, as you have no doubt guessed, are another important thing to notice in music, and something that our ears recognize automatically, as many of yours did with the so-do. Following each so-do motive, after an ascending motion to a higher do, is another pattern, a descending pattern of 3 upward motions. Listen to this. 1, 2, 3, until it lands. I've circled this part for you in the score. We begin on do and fall all the way down to this note, which is sadly not do. It's re. Re, do. It'd be nice if we could just do that. We could just go, if I could write some of my own variation on Schumann, 2, 3, and I mean, basically if I wrote this piece, it would end there. But I think Schumann knows that we are adventurous and defers our enjoyment for a little while longer by going to that other so and then going back. Thanks to our knowledge of patterns, we know what's going to happen. We get the do again. So you get 1, 2, 3. There's the re, so, do. We can tell by the time we get the so that, yes, a do's coming. In fact, this entire piece is just a constant stringing along of patterns and sweeping motions that promise a bit of do, but never let us really rest and stay on it. We keep dreaming up some new beautiful facet that distracts us just for a little bit. At the end, I've circled the final iteration of that descending pattern of upward motions. But wait, there's an extra one. Do you see how there's 4 of them? It's finally the part our ears have been pining for. An extra bit added on, featuring a reassuring la-ti-do. Ah, it's just what we want. Listen. So at the very end where I've circled it for you, 1, 2, 3, la-ti-do. It's so nice and satisfying. Again, there's so much more to say here, but we have to stop for now. On to one of the most interesting instances of do that I have found, which is in another Chopin prelude, the prelude in E minor. I have a student playing this right now, and I noticed this while she was learning it. So we're in E minor. For the sake of simplicity, again, remember we're naming E do instead of la. Would anyone like to venture a guess as to the solfege designation of those first 3 notes? It's not a do. If do is E, then you can count up do, re, mi, fa, so. That's 5 notes up from E. E, F, G, A, B is so, and that's what we have here. It's an octave. It's an octave on the same note. It's so, and if we've just listened to the Schumann, we think, oh, so, do. But no, so we skip that and go, so, again. While you're looking at your music, go ahead and look at the entire treble clef. This clef is played by only the right hand of the piano. Notice how many lines of music there are. There's only one. Only one note is played at a time in the right hand, in the treble clef. In fact, for the first entire line of music, there is only 2 different notes. This is maybe one of the things we love about this languid prelude poem of Chopin's, how the harmonies in the left hand complement and slowly change the things that are happening in the right hand. It's basically the same thing. If we just heard this by itself, we would go so, la, so, la, so, la, so. It's not really that interesting, but when you add all the rest, what we begin to realize is so, our perception of it kind of changes with each new chord and each new note that's being introduced. Now this is the big thing. This is the biggie, you could call it. Answer me this. Where does the treble clef land on do, on a strong beat, which is the first beat of the measure? Where do we get our resolution of all this so? Where's that final do that we've been looking for? It's an E, so it's going to be the first line of the treble clef. I'll tell you. Do you know where it is? The answer is technically measure 17, but that note is just actually a passing tone on its way somewhere else. Our first iteration of do, as it should be, is in measure 21. It's measure 21 of a 25-bar piece of music. We have to wait that long to get our do. But if you're a student of music theory, you'll say, wait, Lydia, that's not really do the way I want it. It's functioning as the third of a C major chord. You'd be right. Also, the next three occurrences of do are doing the same thing. You're not really getting, it doesn't really sound like do. It sounds like something else. It sounds like something that's not finished. It still needs to go somewhere until the very, 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 very last chord in the entire piece. We finally get the end. Like the do that we were waiting for the entire time. It's utterly remarkable. Somehow he's able to write something that makes so much sense all throughout it, but also doesn't. We're so satisfied at the end, probably because we just had to wait through that entire piece of admittedly gorgeous stuff. I think that as much as we all crave the resolution at the beginning, so do, we all would have to admit that it's much better the way Chopin did it than the way we might have chosen. Again, if Lydia had written this piece, and I have written some pieces that just are not worth anything, it would sound like, it would not do, it's so much more unexpected and interesting. Again, I'm not going to play it for you right now. You have to experience this with the entire piece played before it. So defer your ears for a spell while we discuss a little bit of Beethoven. You probably didn't think it could get any better, but you have another thing coming. Let me introduce you to one of my very favorite pieces of piano music, Beethoven's Adagio Cantabile, the second movement of his Pathétique Sonata number 8. As you can tell, it is much loved. My book has now only the first half of the first volume of Beethoven. Between me and my sister, we have demolished it. I'm only going to play the very, very beginning for you right now, just so you can hear it. I'm sure you've all heard it before, though. Wonderful. I could listen to it all day. Sometimes I do play it over and over and over. There is this other pattern. You know, we know about so do now, but there's another pattern which is mi, re, do, which is also it's very strong in our ears. Mi, re, do. You know, it's like life is but a dream. It's the same mi, re, do. It is so strong that there's a music theorist, Heinrich Schenker, who proposed that all pieces ever written in Western music can be deconstructed to some iteration of just mi, re, do. Like seriously, you should see some of the analysis. It's a little far-fetched, but it's very interesting. We have to save that discussion for another time, however. And here, simply notice that Beethoven disregards our love of resolution again. Listen to the beginning. We have mi, re, so. It doesn't go to the do. Instead, it gives us so, which also wants to go back to the do. Yeah, where are we? Let's see. Yeah. What in the world? Yeah, so can you tell me where is the first occurrence of A on a strong beat? We are actually in a bass clef, so it's going to be the very top line. If you look, it's not until measure 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's not until measure 8. It's kind of hard to see. I think I might have marked it in your score for you. Yeah, I've circled it. It's the resolution of something else, but it is our first A. The note before it is simply decorative and serves to draw your ear to the final do. So it goes, or let's see, re, do, but then we get our do. Unfortunately, our joy lasts there only for a very small moment. If you listen,
You have two treble, you have two bass
right.
in the second line, you're lost.
Oh yeah, yes, you do. It's misleading, isn't it? How at the beginning they put a treble and a bass, but then immediately change it to a bass clef. Like there's a treble clef, a key signature, a time signature, and then a bass clef. They could have just started with a bass clef, but they didn't. So if you listen to how that works, you're going along and you're like, wait, yeah. Da 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 da. It would have been nice to go do, but you get a little more interesting thing and go. Da 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 re do mi re so, and he just repeats again how he denies your ear what it is wanting. There's one thing I think that makes that delay until measure 8 of the do so worth it to our ears is that Beethoven uses chromaticism in his melody. Again, there's these naturals that aren't even really in the major scale. There are other notes in there that sound even more dissonant. So like, for example, using a natural, I could find this. I could go do. Remember how we went do, so, and we sang that together? If you go one right below so, between so and fa, it's called fi. So, fi. Do you hear that chromaticism? That's like a really strong dissonance. Beethoven uses some of that in here for us. It helps string our ear along and keep us in time with the music until we're ready to encounter our do. So if you look in your music, I have bracketed them for you and labeled them 1, 2, and 3. You can see there's another pattern here. It's descending fifths. It goes, that's a fifth, perfect fifth. So his melody goes, perfect fifth, and now another perfect fifth. Now it should be a so do. That's what it should be, but it's not. Listen to it. Instead it goes perfect fifth, perfect fifth, perfect. Not a perfect fifth. It's a note that really sticks out, and you're like, ooh, what is that? As a performer, you really have to notice, and you have to prepare people. You can't just go through and play. What would you do? You go. I mean, you could do that, but it just wouldn't be quite as satisfying as playing. Making it very special. So, yeah, it's kind of fun. And you get do like right after it anyway. And your ears really like it. I'm going to skip the next one because we're running out of time, I'm sure. Even though I'm having fun, you're probably tired. We can just go to our Chopin Nocturne, which is the next to last piece on there. I just want to show you a couple of things with it. I'm sure you'd recognize this if I play it, if you can't already tell what it is by the music. one person in this room likes to listen to this in her office sometimes. So we'll hear the rest in just a minute again, but for now, we can quickly run through the elements we've already discussed. You notice at the beginning, it's so, but he doesn't go to do. He goes so, mi, re, do. So at least we get our mi, re, do that we were looking for. But there's a couple little turns there as well. There's also this neat thing called rubato. If you look, I've marked it for myself in the score. It's not necessarily for you, but it was one of my notes. There's a wiggly line and then an arrow. Do you see it? It's on the third line down, close to the end. It helps emphasize resolution and tension in the piece. So if I played that line for you, you would hear, I'm slowing down, but then speeding up a little more here. It's rubato. It's another way that's like not necessarily written in, but a performer can tell, or if you listen to it. There's also a cadenza at the very end where Chopin drops out everything and play. You hear a lot of this, and you're like, when's it going to end? When's it going to end? When's it going to end? Until it finally ends on do, and you're like, that was fun. So there's some Chopin for you. We can end with Shostakovich, because we had to get something kind of new in there. This is Shostakovich's Fantastic Dance, number 1 from 3 Fantastic Dances, Opus 5. It's something I played in college, and I've always just been really intrigued by it. It has lots and lots of flats. Do you see all the flats? They're like little B's written in the music next to the notes. There's also some naturals. It's kind of crazy. But you hear the first note for this is do. You're going to hear a do at the very beginning. And then the right hand goes do as well. You get some nice do's apart from each other. But then you hear a lot of crazy chromaticism going away from it until you finally get back to do. It's just a nice little foray into something exciting. Listen. T, do. That's basically what happens in this piece. If you listen, you can hear this T a lot that is resolved with a do in the left hand, and then it keeps going. So it sounds completely different than something like Chopin or Beethoven, but there's still that do in there, and the T that's taking you up to the do. There's also a pattern in the left hand that's very popular. The bass note goes do, fa, so. Guess what's next? Do. That's what happened. I can bring that out for you. Fa, fa, so, do. Hear that at the bottom? So there's something happening in the right hand and the left hand, and there's lots of interesting little things happening in between. Now, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Debussy, but we don't have time again, and I forgot the Debussy music, so who cares? We will do it next year, yes. I love Debussy so much. But you have now graduated from an elementary whirlwind of music analysis and theory. Time to sit back and listen just a little bit, if you will sit a little bit longer. Although maybe listening is more than just sitting back. Try to listen to each piece with new ears, listening to the parts we discussed about, listening for things that are repeated, forming expectations about what you think should happen next, and then learning to go with what you end up getting. Listen the way we hope all of our students listen at St. Constantine. So I gave you a little program of the pieces I'm going to play. They're all really short, but they're all really beautiful and very interesting. So here's a little piano for you. We'll begin with the Chopin. Where is it? I should mark these things. Yes. I would also like to note that the music is grouped into sets. So we're going to just, not that like you would want to applaud at this point in the night, But I would like for you to practice a little proper applause, proper performance etiquette. When you go to a music concert, you will applaud between the sets. So they're grouped into sets of music, and you will not applaud between. You will also listen to the very last note of every piece until it completely dies away. It's not like it ends, and then you're like, okay, we're done. Instead, it's still going, still going, still going, still going. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. Still going. Still going. You might not be able to hear it, but I can hear it. Still going. Still going. Still going. I'm sorry, but it is. Okay, now I think it's just the air conditioner, like, reverberating in the strings. Anyway, and the performer will always tell you when the music is done. Performers care so much about it, generally. I hope I care. That they don't often just quit. They will listen, and listen with them. So here we go. Thank you. You remember to clap at the appropriate time. Thank you, thank you. I'll still play the one for you that was not discussed. Yes. Thank you. Excellent. Finally, time for this one.